Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Leveraging the Power of AI in Your Professional Development. My name is Nicole Walker, and I've recently joined Griffith University as the Senior Alumni Engagement Manager. It's my pleasure to be your host today. We have over 1,800 alumni registered for today's session from 56 countries and 46 different class years represented. So a wonderfully diverse audience online with us today. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which we are all on. My apologies, I was testing the sound in here and I forgot to turn that off on my phone. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we are all located today. I am on the lands of the Yugambeh peoples, and I pay my respect to elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. AI is transforming the nature of our work in thousands of ways. I'm sure we've all interacted today and been impacted in some way by AI. Professionals who know how to use AI in their work are already in high demand, and today we're going to give you advice on how you can best leverage AI to be your career companion. Today's session is being recorded and you'll receive an email when it's available in a few weeks' time. We're going to have a 30-minute presentation by our guest speaker, Dr. David Tuffley, who I'm going to introduce shortly, followed by a live Q&A, which I'll host with David. For the Q&A, please keep your questions short to enable us to get through as many as possible. You can post questions at any time. The moderating team will start to publish questions towards the end of David's presentation. Given the high number of questions we're anticipating, we'll do our best to get through as many as possible and post questions across a range of themes today. Our guest speaker, Dr. David Tuffley, is a senior lecturer in Applied Ethics and Cybersecurity at Griffith University School of ICT. With a background in anthropology and psychology, Dr. Tuffley's work is centred on enabling individuals to comfortably interact with technology and leverage it to their advantage. David has published more than 70 articles in The Conversation, reaching over 2.5 million readers. He's been working on another one this morning. He's just told us with some big news happening in the AI space. He also has over 60 peer-reviewed academic articles, is a sought-after tech-explainer on national radio and television, and has over 80 non-fiction titles in print and ebook formats. His formal qualifications include a PhD in software engineering, Master of Philosophy in Information Systems, a grad certificate in higher education, all those from Griffith University, and he also has a Bachelor of Arts majoring in psychology, English literature and anthropology from the University of Queensland. I'm going to ask David to unmute himself now, and I'll hand over to him to take you through today's presentation. I'll be back at the end to moderate the Q&A. David, we're thrilled to be hearing from you today, and over to you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Nicole, for that generous introduction. And let me just say that I'm particularly honoured to be here with alumni from all over the world. I am an inaugural student of this university. I started a Bachelor of Science degree in 1975, the first year that Griffith was teaching. And it's particularly satisfying for me to be sitting here giving you an introduction to what is probably the most transformative technology to come along, certainly in recent times, perhaps in recent decades. There are so many misconceptions about AI. There is a fair amount of anxiety, I think, surrounding it as to whether or not it's going to take people's jobs. Well, I'm here to put that into some kind of good perspective for you so that not only can you be reassured about your job and your career future, but that you will know, you will have the tools and the understanding to use AI to actually get ahead in your career. And this is certainly feasible and quite possible. So I will introduce you to a range of tools. I'll mention their names during the presentation, but I have compiled them in a list which will be distributed to everybody who has registered for this event, so that you don't need to copy down these details, but I will make mention of them. So just a couple of general points before I launch into the presentation. The first being that artificial intelligence is not actually artificial. That is a misnomer. It is human intelligence that has been externalized into a computer in which it functions. But essentially, it's not artificial. It has been made by humans to be used by humans for any number of purposes. So it is actually just a tool in the same way that all the other technology that we use and all the other non-technology tools like, power tools, garden implements, cars, or you name it. They are all devices that people have made in order to allow us to do things that we want to do that we couldn't do without the assistance of those technologies. It's very simple, really. And it goes back at least 300,000 years to the very earliest times of humanity. That's when modern humans emerged as a species. And even then, we were making tools. We were making stone knives. We were making spears. We learned to use fire. Now, that's a really good example to use in relation to AI because fire was transformative. It allowed the cooking of food. We could eat things that we wouldn't otherwise be able to eat. We were able to keep warm at night. We were able to sit around the fire and pass along knowledge and ideas around the fire. Plus, it was pretty handy for defending against predators that might come calling to the campsite. Poke them with a burning stick and they probably won't come back. The point is, it was so useful, but also had its dangers. It could burn down the village if it wasn't used carefully. So, like fire, AI is something that has so many benefits, but that it does need to be carefully handled. And I'm a great advocate for the ethical development and use of technology. I am not an advocate of doing away with technology because it has the potential to do harm, simply because it has the potential for doing harm. It hasn't done any harm yet, but it could. There are those who would like to see it either banned or slowed right down so that it wasn't moving so fast. The sensible, rational thing to do in this case is to maximize the benefits and minimize the risk that people have in the use of these things. And if we do that, we will, as a species, as a community, be able to use it in very profitable ways. And I will be going through some of those ways. All right, so if I could have the next slide, please. We needn't dwell too long on this. Nicole did indicate most of this, so let's go to the next slide. So I've touched on this already, the definition of artificial intelligence, but I think most of you will know what it is, essentially. But at its heart, AI is really just a computer program that is a set of steps, a set of procedural steps that tells the program what to do and when to do it. It is really no more than a program. It's a very sophisticated program, admittedly, and it has a lot of capabilities, but essentially it is something that has been created by people. And that should be comforting for a lot of us because well, I think perhaps science fiction has something to answer for here. There is hardly a science fiction story or movie or TV show that I have seen, and I've been a big fan of sci-fi, that hasn't involved some element of technology menace, some sort of risk, some sort of, humans have to rally and overcome the threat of this rogue technology. It's essentially possible to just write into the programs the ethical principles that need to be there. And AI doesn't forget its programming. Humans, on the other hand, we people are not altogether consistent in the way we practice ethics, but AI can be and would be. It just needs to be programmed that way. Distinguishing between narrow and general AI. Again, I won't assume that you haven't heard of these things, but I will clarify. Narrow AI is everywhere, and I'm sure that almost all of us use it multiple times every day. For example, Google Maps, Google navigation on my phone is extremely good at getting me to where I want to be, but it can't do anything else. It is simply narrowly focused on that one task. And you don't want it doing anything else. You simply want it to do its job as seamlessly as possible without undue, attention being paid to it. It just does its job. We have thousands, well, hundreds at least, of examples of narrow, and there's nothing menacing about that. General AI is, on the other hand, comparable to human intelligence. Now, I mentioned 300,000 years ago, we humans emerged as a species, and over that evolutionary journey since then, we have evolved a very strategically focused mind. Psychology basically describes that as the ego. The ego is simply a survival mechanism that humans evolved in order to strategize ways of staying alive. So it's made us extremely adaptable. We are great problem solvers. We are very creative because the demands of the environment were such that, well, we needed to have that. Otherwise, we wouldn't have survived as a species. Now, AI is nowhere near able to replicate the human ability to adapt, to overcome, to be creative. It is still some distance from that. And at a recent conference of AI academics and researchers, they were asked, in their opinion, how long before AGI comes about. And the estimates range from 50 years to 5 years. So, experts don't always agree on things, and this is one case. My view really is that the middle ground is really where the truth usually lies. And so I'm thinking probably in the next 15 to 20 years, we will see the emergence of something close to AGI. Do we need to be worried about it? I don't think so, because if it is used in the right way by humans, then it will not be a problem. And by the right way, I mean it is used as an assistant, it is used as a helper for people doing their jobs. Now, all of you listening to this will be in a very wide range of professional disciplines, other sort of sectors in the economy, all across the economy. And I can say confidently that pretty much every single one of those areas is going to have an AI tool or tool set that you can use to do your job. And that is the correct sort of relationship to have with the AI as a helper, you in control, it as the helper. There was an article in the press recently, a little while ago now, but basically it said this woman here, Japanese lady, is the first person in Japan to have had their life saved by a computer. And it turned out that she had a rare form of leukemia, and the team of human doctors misdiagnosed her as having a more common form of that disease. They prescribed a treatment. She didn't respond to it. So the next thing they tried was they sequenced her genome, which can be done quite cheaply these days, and fed that into Dr. Watson. Now that was IBM's medical-oriented AI, fed it into that along with about several 100,000 oncological studies. That's, studies about cancer, medical journal articles into Dr. Watson. And in only 11 minutes, it came up with not only the correct diagnosis, but an effective treatment regime, which was implemented, and the lady's life was saved. But of course, it wasn't Dr. Watson that was treating this lady. It was still her human doctors. They remained in control of the process at all times. Now, if that example, that's a pretty good example of how useful AI can be. It can be a matter of life and death, but in whatever pursuit, in whatever profession you are, the best thing that you can do is to use the AI chatbots to find out what AI tools exist in your sector, and I will give you a suggested prompt to do that, and begin your journey at becoming highly skilled at using these tools. That's really the key message of this whole presentation, is that the tools will exist and there will be more and more of them as time goes by. Learn to use them and you will be in demand. Your productivity will increase exponentially, well, perhaps not exponentially, let's not get carried away there, but you will become much more productive. So next slide, please. We have heard a lot in recent times about the economic impact. I'll just mention a report that I read recently from McKinsey, the consulting group. They estimated, after studying this matter in depth, that if the Australian economy, if Australian business embraces the AI tools that will exist, and perhaps if they develop their own, that something like 10 billion, no, I'm sorry, I'm thinking about something else. About 3.6 billion, a trillion, I'm sorry, all these figures, 3.6 trillion Australian dollars will be added to the Australian economy over the next 10 years. Now that's value that wouldn't have existed if we weren't using the AI. So this really highlights the next major point here, is that for all the jobs that will be lost, there will be new jobs created. The history of technology is full of examples of how new technologies do replace some jobs, but will create a lot more that don't currently exist. Now, I wish I could tell you what they were, but they haven't been invented yet. People haven't thought of them yet, so they don't exist, but we know that they will exist. In the 80s, when I started out in the IT industry, there were still typing pools in organizations, people who were paid to type out longhand documents into a IBM golf ball typewriter. And when PCs came onto everybody's desk, those typing pools became redundant. And I remember press stories at the time bemoaning the fact that jobs were going. But of course, the people working in those fields didn't stay unemployed for long, because keyboard skills were still in demand for data entry and any number of other reasons. Computers still used a QWERTY keyboard, but it also created about a dozen new industry categories in this emerging PC computer industry. Everything from hardware engineers to salespeople to programmers to you name it. There was just dozens of new jobs created, and that is a pattern that has been repeated over and over. So be reassured that as AI comes into widespread deployment, we won't see massive job losses, except in those job areas that people don't much like doing anyway. These would be dirty jobs, dangerous jobs, remote jobs, boring jobs, very process-driven factory type jobs. This is why, most cars these days are assembled by robots. Robots, or AI that lives on those robots, is extremely good at enacting a process. It'll just do it all day, every day. It won't make any mistakes, whereas humans get bored and do make mistakes. So there is no reason why anyone should not have a job if they want a job. They just need to find out what the tools are in the sector that they are interested in and make it their business to learn those tools. So there is a lot of economic impact, suffice to say. All right, next slide, please. So this inevitably leads us to the question about how you can use AI for your professional development or your career development. You can use it for those three things and a lot more besides. So I did look up quite a few sources for this sort of thing, and I'll just mention a couple of names. As I mentioned, you will receive this compiled list by way of the thank you email you get for having registered for this event. There are multiple online learning platforms, leading among them would be ones like Coursera and Udacity, but there are loads of others, Khan Academy, Microsoft, Google. They all have a range of AI knowledge, upskilling people. And you don't need to be highly technical to learn this. This is for people, non-technical people, who want to know about, the tools. And there are these personalized learning pathways that can be constructed. And this is the real strength of AI, is that when you tell it about yourself, let's assume that you are prepared to do that. Not everybody, privacy is an issue, and sometimes we don't want to reveal too much information about ourselves. But if we tell the AI what we're interested in and what we would like to achieve, where we want to go with our career, it can construct a highly personalized learning path for you. There's a service called Plural Site. They tailor these learning paths using AI and adapting to people's individual sort of progress and their strengths and weaknesses. Skillsoft is another one. We're talking about expanding networks there. There are loads of great ways to expand networks. AI-powered networking platforms like Ripple Match is one that I found. It uses algorithms to connect people, professionals, and others with relevant networking opportunities that you may not otherwise hear about. This highlights the question that if you don't know the right questions to ask, you won't get the answers you need. If it's an unknown, you won't know what to ask for. And that's where these tools can really come in handy, is that they can anticipate what it is you want to know and tell you, even though you may not know what it is you want to know. Sorry, yeah, that's like going down a rabbit hole talking about that sort of thing. Lunch Club is another one, but of course, the granddaddy of all of those is LinkedIn. I'm a chronic LinkedIn user, and I find it an extremely useful professional networking tool. So these are all ways that you can advance your career. I'll just mention one or two others. Automated relationship management is something that can be facilitated by AI. You can get automated skill assessment. So it will ask you a series of questions, you'll answer it candidly, and it will suggest to you what other career paths might suit somebody with your set of skills that you may not have considered. So there's one called Metal, METTL. There's Hacker Rank. There's several. All of these ones that I'm mentioning, I'm just mentioning two, but there are multiple in every one of those categories that you can look to. But basically, it is having the willingness, the preparedness to continue your learning journey as a professional thing. Now, we all know that professional development is important, and we're probably all doing it, but it's becoming all the more important as the technology accelerates. You know, there are new products coming out, new capabilities that unless we constantly monitor what is going on, then we may not really know what we're missing out on. So I would love to talk more about this, but we are on the clock, so I will continue on. But just look for that PDF coming at you in your email after the event. Next slide. Yes, updating your skill set with AI. I have touched on some of these things already, but that just reinforces for you that there are these learning platforms, there are personalized learning paths, and so on. Really, the takeaway message here is that there is a wealth already, you know, and this is just early days. It's only a year since OpenAI brought ChatGPT 3.0 out, just November in 2022. And since then, all of these, there have been hundreds of startups that have looked at the potential of this and have developed product, have productized it, used it as an enabler. And, you know, I've heard AI compared to not just fire, as I did earlier, but with electricity. You know, 100 and something years ago, when electricity became widely available, entrepreneurs came up with any number of different ways that electricity could be used to benefit people's lives, like, I don't know, electric refrigerators for a start, electric pumps to pump water, you know, and literally hundreds of products were created that ran on electricity that didn't exist prior to electricity. Same with AI. It is an enabling technology. And, you know, you may be someone with an entrepreneurial bent. If you can think of interesting ways of using AI, you might be able to start up a company and do something really interesting yourself. It's wide open, early days, 12 months. In 5 years' time, we'll barely recognize the landscape. In fact, I would go so far as to say that I think in hundreds of years' time, this period of history right now will be discussed as being pivotal in the development of humanity. All right, it's a big statement, but I stand by it. Next slide, please. Yes, just reinforcing some of those networking opportunities. I did mention some of this, but not all of it. You know, event recommendations, AI-enhanced communication and knowledge sharing platforms. this is just the start, and you can avail yourself of this. All right, next slide, please. So here is a tidy little workflow that you might use in order to take the steps necessary to advance your career using some of the AI tools that are available. Now, I did mention that I would give you an example prompt. The prompt is all important when using AI. The more specific you are about who you are, what sort of voice, what sort of output you want, the better the answers will be. So if I was a medical professional or a lawyer, I might say to the ChatGPT or whichever tool you're using, you might say, you are an experienced medical professional or lawyer or accountant or teacher with 10 years, 20 years experience. You want to investigate what career-enhancing AI-enabled tools exist in my sector. Please list 10, 15, 20 such tools, break them up by subheading and use plain English as you do it. Something like that. I use that sort of formula. You give context, you give very specific directions as to what you want, what you're hoping to get them for. And because it's been trained on so much data on the internet, it knows what an experienced medical professional is like, what sort of language they use, what sort of things they want to know. Any profession, it's all there. And so the output that you get can actually be so close to what is, you could use it's quite uncanny. So look to using AI-powered job matching tools, resume optimization, predictive career analytics, performance feedback, and so on. AI career coaches. These are all tools, and you can ask the tools to recommend. You could say, I am an accountant and I want to optimize my resume, and it'll come back with half a dozen ones. You can upload your resume, tell it what you're hoping to do, hoping to achieve, where you want to go, what your aspirations are, and it will say, well, we suggest you do this to your resume. Predictive career analytics. So it's really just as simple as knowing the right way to tell the ChatGPT or Claude or any of the others that are coming along what it is you're wanting. Next slide, please. There is a lot of talk and a lot of concern really about how AI is going to affect the future of work. And I would really just say that, that I've addressed that throughout this entire presentation. I see it as being a very powerful tool set, enabling tool set that will allow people in whatever field you happen to be in to acquire much more powerful capabilities than you currently have. Next slide, please. And finishing off to basically, there is obviously a very important matter of making sure that AI is developed responsibly so that it doesn't harm people, that it creates good and does no harm. And as I mentioned, we can program that sort of information in. Probably the biggest risk is rogue states who don't sign up to the voluntary code of conduct. but there are ways that these sorts of risks can also be managed. But that's really a topic for a whole presentation in its own right. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so whilst you're thinking about questions you might like to ask, I'll hand back to Nicole in just a moment, but let me finish my presentation by saying, really, you are poised at the brink of the next level in your professional career. Get set to level up your game and, you know, go for it. It's really worth doing. So over to you, Nicole. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Thanks, David. That was outstanding, really exciting. I've been jotting down notes as you've been talking, and the fact that we're in this really exciting time is just fantastic. And I think that reassurance you provided around the tools, we do have some questions in that space that we'll get to in a minute. But I would like to reiterate that prompt that you gave everyone for those wanting. It's another common theme we've got coming through the questions is those specific industry questions. And so that prompt around asking ChatGPT to provide insights for a particular industry and the recommendations for that industry is just really useful. So thank you for that. So we're going to get started with some of the questions coming through. So I'm going to go, the first one does sit around the risks, the bias, the ethics around that, which you did touch on in there. But is there, I guess, anything else you want to add or any additional reassurance you might like to offer the audience around that space?
Yes, definitely. Now, algorithmic bias is a major issue that is facing the industry, and ethicists are very concerned with it. It is a problem that is amenable to a remedy, and it's not difficult to do. But I will put it into perspective by saying, so for example, in the 70s, in the medical world, the majority of doctors in hospitals were men, and the majority of nurses were women. Now, today, in the 2020s, the majority are now women in hospitals, women doctors. And there are more male nurses than there were back then. If an AI is being trained on that 1970s data, then it is going to be biased towards doctors being male. That's an obvious example, and they're not going to be always that obvious, but when bias becomes evident and people report on it, and people are quick to report on it, then it can be fixed quite quickly. So once it's pointed at, once it's identified, it can be fixed. So it's not like it's a wicked problem that, you know, nobody really knows how to fix. It's just that there's probably quite a lot of bias in the training data that's being used, and it is progressively being ironed out. So I've noticed just in the last 12 months since ChatGPT came out, it is a lot better on that front than it was 12 months ago. So that's the main thing to say about that.
Okay, great. Thanks, David. Am I talking right? Yes, okay, I'm talking. So just building off that, David, so thank you for providing some reassurance and more clarity and context around that. Another common question is around managing our own cybersecurity and personal risk. So we've got a question here around any recommended platforms or security measures individuals should take before uploading items such as their resume for optimization.
Yes, yeah, that's a great question. The whole issue of privacy is fraught because everybody has their own level of privacy comfort. There are some people who will put maximum information about themselves out there on the web, and those who put nothing out there on the web. I think what we're going to see is services having a slider, a privacy slider with maximum privacy at one end, minimum at the other, and people can set whatever they are comfortable with. Now, the point being that if you give it a lot of information about yourself, then it is able to make really quite accurate predictive analyses on your data and give you probably very useful information. But your strengths and weaknesses, as outlined in your CV, will be known to that platform, and what they do with that is out of your control, because in their terms and conditions it says, well, we own that now. And they might sell it to someone who wants to use it for advertising. That is the price we pay for putting our data on the internet, is that if it's free, then we are the product. Now, not everybody minds that, but some people do. So, being aware of it going beyond your control, and if you're uncomfortable with it, ending up with somebody who's looking to market products to you, then don't, just don't do it. Yeah. But so there isn't really anything we can do beyond not doing it to absolutely guarantee our privacy. But essentially, services like that, just quickly finish that question, that if they don't do the right thing, then the Bush Telegraph soon hears about it, and it's very bad for business once that becomes known.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that, David. That's really helpful. I think that's just coming back to for me to be live. Perfect. So the next question we've got here is around how you specifically use AI in your day-to-day work practices. So I can briefly talk to how I guess I'm using it. I'm predominantly only use ChatGPT, but then we'll go to a more advanced user. But in my current role, it's predominantly a marketing and communications role. So for me, ChatGPT is a great tool to read over drafts for me, or to assess the tone of the writing and things like that, of what we can use to help. And when you're writing to different audiences, obviously you write in a different way, or we often have, maybe we've got a 400-word story and we want that to be a social media post, so we can ask ChatGPT to help do that with us, for us. But perhaps it'd be a lot more interesting for our audience, I'm sure, to hear some of the ways you use ChatGPT and what advantages you're seeing for yourself.
Yeah, well, I use it in all sorts of ways. I'll preface that by saying I don't put out anything that I haven't written myself, but I ask it to canvas topics, and I could come up with those topics myself. It would take me longer, but I wouldn't get as many. And so I can get a list of maybe 10 items that I want to include, like topic items that I want to include in a document I'm writing, that in a matter of seconds, which I can then expand on and use the ChatGPT to give me ideas about what to say in each one of those things. So it's very much like you've got a really enthusiastic, talented intern working for you that you can just, give them a task like that. Hey, I have to write this document, but I want you to do some preliminary investigation for me. Just come up with a list of topics, maybe a structure, just come up with something, give it to me, and I'll take it from there. So that, so if I'm writing a conversation article, now I've written a lot and I've done them, all of them have been done by me wholly and solely, and they take a long time. They take maybe 6 hours for me to write something like that. It's only 800 words, but boy, you sweat over that. I can get ChatGPT to give me a list of topics, and a structure, which I can then flesh out. And in the one that I wrote just today, I shortened the time probably by half. But I hasten to add, I didn't get it to write it for me. So there's nothing, and there's really no reason to think that using a tool like that is somehow dishonest. If you're programming it and you're asking it the questions, you're getting it to do the things, and then you take that output and you adapt it in the way that you would adapt it to be your voice, then that's perfectly legitimate. And we tell our students that they can use it. Well, I don't need our permission, they're going to use it anyway, but they'll be using it once they get into the workforce, so they need to know how to use it now. So it is legitimate. It's a legitimate tool. So if anyone has reservations about the honesty of that, so long as you don't misrepresent the source, and you check, you do due diligence, and if it's making claims, then check those claims, because sometimes it hallucinates with claims, but it's getting better at that too.
Yeah. All right. I love that reference there that you gave about the enthusiastic intern. It very much, that's a fantastic reference. And I think that's something for people who haven't used ChatGPT is, you do have to have written it yourself. You have to know what you're talking about. And if you're not sure, ask it to do it and you'll see the difference, I guess, in terms of what you've done. But one question we've got in here does neatly tie along that, and it's around copyright and that, which you have sort of touched on. But is there any more guidance? And it's very new for companies and organizations. There's not a lot of policy around this to guide people. So is there anything further on? Obviously, do the work yourself. Absolutely fact check anything. Is there any other advice you'd offer?
Sure. The whole question of intellectual property and copyright is another very fraught issue, like privacy. The creative community is very upset that the graphical image generator, Midjourney and DALL-E, has been trained on millions of publicly accessible images, and people are saying that their IP is being stolen. It's a bit contentious, but what the AI companies are doing is not illegal. Arguably, it may not be ethical, but it's not illegal in the sense that what it generates is not copyrighted material. And as people would know, copyright applies to the replication of someone else's work, but the ideas contained in that work, if they're expressed in other words, then that's not infringing that copyright. So that's what these models do, is that it takes the concepts and it rephrases it very specifically to the prompt that it's given. So no two outputs, theoretically at least, no two outputs are going to be the same. I don't know if I can say that absolutely, but what it writes is not taking chunks of text from someone's work and just putting it out there. They would be sued for doing that, and it would have happened before now. So if you're at all concerned about that, you can use tools like Turnitin or other tools that exist on the net, and you just basically upload the document and ask it, does this text exist anywhere else on the net? And if it does, it will report on that. It'll avoid mentioning common phrases. It's smart enough to know whether something has been plagiarized. So one has to be careful about that, but that's a manageable risk.
Okay, thank you. We're going to do one last question quickly. We've just got enough time, I am hoping. So we'll
Okay.
just do one last question, and then we'll start to wrap up. And so this one is, I guess, hoping for you to use it as an example. So we've got a question here around my creative PhD is exploring the intersection of AI and live theatre. Can you talk through how a live theatre producer might leverage AI? The narrow tasks involved in a theatre production process would include things like scheduling, contracting, employees, communications, logistics, making running edits to script, ticketing, website, marketing, asset development, and distribution. Now, obviously, that's a big question,
Yes.
but it is something that could, hopefully our attendees can sort of easily apply across to their industry. So maybe
Yes.
just in a minute or so, you could give some context
Yeah.
around how you can use AI for that type of
Yeah,
tasks.
I love that. I love that idea of a creative PhD in live theatre like that. Yeah, look, all of those aspects, all of those procedural points that you mentioned, all of them can be prompted. AI could prompt you, could give you answers as to optimal ways of managing those aspects. So you can do it in two levels, and this applies to everybody, is that you preface your thing by saying, I am a director of a live theatre, etc., or you are a director of a live theatre, you are producing a play, da, 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 da. Then you ask the specific question, I'm looking to sequence this, or I'm looking to do that. You know, please make substantive suggestions as to the best way to do that. And so you keep that first sentence there, and for each of those sub steps or those smaller steps, you just copy and paste a different prompt into that existing prompt and see what it comes back with. And it might end up you doing a dozen or more such queries, but
Yep.
over the course of that, you'll get a very substantial sort of amount of information, which you are free to follow or not follow. And you might think, well, that's good, but I think I could do it better if I did it this way. So that's it. To be strategic about your prompts and to give it enough context to know what it is who you are and what you're trying to achieve, and essentially the specifics of the job that you want some information about. And that applies to every single field.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, David. That is really excellent. All right, so we're going to have to start to wrap things up here. We've had so many questions coming through. So what I'd first, I guess, like to say is we've really learned today that AI is a partner. It's not a competitor or a threat. And those human skills of creativity, critical thinking, problem solving, collaboration are also important. And that's something we can work alongside AI to help us. We've had a lot of questions around specific industries and also getting started. So as David mentioned, he has a handout that we will share, and it is wonderful. It's incredibly generous of him that we'll send out, and it gives tools for different tasks you're trying to do, plus educational suggestions of where to start your journey, even if you're from a non-tech background, of how you can go about doing that. So really, when we get that to you via email, make sure you have a look at that. You'll be really pleased with it. The other next step that we have for you is that we've recently launched AMP, which is the Alumni to Alumni mentoring program here at Griffith University, and it's an online virtual mentoring platform. And we've actually gone in and added an AI connection point. So alumni can sign up either as mentees or mentors or both. So I really encourage you to go and sign up. We'll post a link here in the chat and also include it in the follow-up email. So you can go in there and tag that you're interested in either helping others with their AI journey, or you're wanting to learn more. And that's a really great way. I think if you haven't used the tool before, find someone who has, a friend, a colleague, and just, sit with them and try some prompts. And also start small, start with something you know the answer to, so you can learn how to ask the right question to get the right answer for you. Thank you so much, David, for your insights today. We're very proud to call you a Griffith alum, and how fortunate all the students are who get to learn from you each day in their classes. This is unfortunately our last webinar for 2023, but we will be back in the new year with more, and we would love to hear your topic suggestions. So if anyone has suggestions, you'll receive an event survey. It's going to be a big email coming to you, the handout, the mentoring link, and a survey. So please let us know what topics you're interested in for next year. Our October webinar around being a master mentor. So if that's something you're interested in your career journey, it is now live on YouTube, and we'll post that link here as well for you today. We're going to wrap up with a message from our Vice Chancellor about the university's campaign to create a brighter future for all. And we'd just like to thank you again for your attendance, and congratulations on investing in yourself.
As we near our 50th anniversary, it's time for Griffith to be bold in our ambitions for the future. We were founded as a university with a mandate to do things a little bit differently and seize the opportunities in front of us. That remains true today. I am therefore proud to launch our first major philanthropic initiative, the campaign to create a brighter future for all. We've identified 5 key philanthropic priorities where, together with our partners, we are well placed to make a positive impact. Transformative education, healthier lives, a thriving environment, a resilient Asia Pacific, and strong communities and societies. And we want to make a difference in these 5 areas, not just for the lucky few, but for all. We've set an ambitious goal of raising $125 million to allow our research, education and engagement to have an even greater impact. We are looking for people to provide life-changing scholarships, to support transformative research, and to ensure that Griffith grows in strength in the coming decades. The campaign aims to also engage 100,000 alumni with increased opportunity for volunteering, mentoring and networking. I encourage you to explore the life-changing work that is being done across the university thanks to the support of our philanthropic partners and alumni. As we work towards our ambitious goal, I invite you to continue on this journey with us, because I know that together we can create a brighter future for all.